I, 28F, never thought I'd be in this situation, questioning everything about my relationship with my boyfriend Tom, 30M. We've been together for 3 years, and until recently, I thought we had a solid foundation. Tom and I met at a mutual friend's barbecue during a sweltering summer day. I remember how he made me laugh when he accidentally knocked over the cooler, sending ice and drinks sliding across the patio. That clumsy moment turned into a conversation that lasted hours, and soon we were inseparable. Tom's always been the kind of guy who could light up a room with his smile. He works as a graphic designer and has this incredible ability to see beauty in the most mundane things. I fell in love with his creativity, his kindness, and the way he always seemed to know how to make me feel better after a rough day at my job as a pediatric nurse. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, we had moved in together, blending our lives in a cozy apartment filled with Tom's artwork and my collection of quirky mugs. We talked about the future, marriage, kids, maybe even opening a small cafe together someday. Everything seemed perfect. But now, I'm sitting here wondering if I ever really knew Tom at all. It all started about 6 months ago when Tom's sister Amy, 26F, moved back to our city after finishing her master's degree in marine biology in Australia. Tom was over the moon about Amy's return. I'd only met her a handful of times before, mostly during holiday gatherings, but she seemed nice enough. Amy had this bubbly personality that matched Tom's, and I could see why they were close. At first, everything was normal. Amy would come over for dinner once a week, and we'd all hang out. She'd regale us with stories of the Great Barrier Reef and the research she'd been doing on coral bleaching. Tom would listen with rapt attention, his eyes shining with pride for his little sister. I enjoyed these evenings too, at least in the beginning. But as time went on, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Tom and Amy were always sitting close together on the couch, whispering and giggling like they had some inside joke. When I'd ask what was so funny, they'd just say, "Oh, nothing," and change the subject. It reminded me of how Tom and I used to be in the early days of our relationship, and that comparison made me uneasy. Then there were the constant text messages. Tom's phone would be buzzing nonstop, and every time I glanced over, it was Amy. They seemed to have endless things to talk about, from childhood memories to current events. I tried not to be the jealous girlfriend, but it was hard not to feel left out. When I brought it up to Tom, he said I was overreacting and that Amy was just excited to be back home and catching up with her brother. I tried to push my concerns aside. After all, Tom and Amy had been separated for years while she was in Australia. It was natural for them to want to reconnect, right? I thought back to my own relationship with my older brother, Mark. We were close, but not in the same way Tom and Amy seemed to be. Mark and I would catch up every few weeks with a phone call, maybe get together for dinner once a month. But we didn't have this constant need to be in touch. Things really took a turn about a month ago. Tom and I had plans to go out for dinner to celebrate my promotion at work. I had been looking forward to it all week, even bought a new dress for the occasion. But 2 hours before we were supposed to leave, Tom canceled, saying Amy needed his help with something urgently. I was disappointed but tried to be understanding. The next day, I asked how everything went, and Tom was vague, just saying they had sibling stuff to deal with. When I pressed for more details, he got defensive and changed the subject. A week later, I was at work when I realized I'd forgotten an important file at home. I decided to take an early lunch break and run back to our apartment to grab it. As I approached our door, I heard laughter coming from inside. Confused, I opened the door to find Tom and Amy sitting on the couch, much closer than siblings should be. Tom's arm was around Amy's shoulders, and her head was resting on his chest. They jumped apart when they saw me, looking guilty. I confronted Tom about it later that night, but he got defensive. He said I was imagining things and that I should trust him. He accused me of being jealous of his relationship with Amy and said I was trying to come between them. His words hurt, especially because we'd never had trust issues before. I went to bed that night feeling like there was a chasm growing between us. The following weeks were tense. Tom spent more and more time with Amy, often canceling our plans at the last minute. When he was home, he was distant and irritable. I found myself walking on eggshells, afraid to bring up Amy or express my concerns for fear of starting another argument. Last weekend was the final straw. Tom told me he was going to help Amy move some furniture into her new apartment. He said he'd be back by dinner time, and we made plans to order in and watch a movie. I spent the afternoon cleaning the apartment and looking forward to some quality time with my boyfriend. When 9 p.m. rolled around and he still wasn't home, I called him. No answer. I texted. Nothing. By midnight, I was worried sick. All sorts of scenarios were running through my head. What if they'd gotten into an accident? What if something had happened to Amy and Tom was at the hospital? I called hospitals in the area, but no one matching their description had been admitted. He finally came home at 2 a.m., smelling like alcohol. When I asked where he'd been, he said he and Amy had finished moving early, so they decided to grab a drink. One drink turned into several, and they lost track of time. He apologized for not calling, but I was too upset to accept it. We got into a huge argument, with me accusing him of prioritizing Amy over our relationship, and him calling me controlling and paranoid. The next day, while Tom was in the shower, I did something I'm not proud of. I looked at his phone. What I found made my heart sink. There were hundreds of messages between him and Amy, many of them flirty and suggestive. They talked about inside jokes I wasn't part of, made plans without including me, and there were even a few pictures that definitely crossed the line of what's appropriate between siblings. One message particularly stood out. Amy had written, "Remember that summer when we were teenagers? Sometimes I wish we could go back to those days." Tom had replied, "Me too. Things were simpler then. No one to judge us." I'm at a loss. I love Tom, and up until Amy came back, I thought we had a future together. But now I can't ignore what I've seen. The idea that he might be having an inappropriate relationship with his sister is making me sick. I don't know if I'm overreacting or if my suspicions are valid. Part of me wants to confront Tom with what I found, but I'm afraid of his reaction. Will he gaslight me again? Try to turn this around on me? Or will he finally admit that something isn't right? I've thought about reaching out to Amy, but I'm not sure what good that would do. If they are involved in something inappropriate, she's unlikely to be honest with me. And if I'm wrong about all of this, I could be damaging my relationship with Tom beyond repair. I need advice. How do I approach this situation? Should I confront Tom? Should I talk to Amy? Or am I just being paranoid and need to trust my boyfriend? I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I don't know what to do next. Update 1: It's been 2 weeks since my original post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone who took the time to respond and offer advice. Your words gave me the courage to confront the situation head on, even though it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. The day after I made my post, I decided I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I took a day off work, knowing I needed to have this conversation when we both had time and weren't exhausted from our jobs. I spent the morning rehearsing what I wanted to say, trying to find a way to express my concerns without sounding accusatory. When Tom came home from work, I was sitting at our kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. I asked him to sit down, saying we needed to talk. I could see the confusion and worry on his face as he took a seat across from me. I started by telling him how much I loved him and valued our relationship. Then, taking a deep breath, I laid out all my concerns, the canceled plans, the secretive behavior, the inappropriate closeness I'd witnessed between him and Amy. I told him about looking at his phone and what I'd found. I half expected him to get angry or defensive, but instead, he broke down crying. Through his tears, Tom confessed that things between him and Amy had gotten out of hand. He swore that nothing physical had happened, but admitted that their relationship had become emotionally inappropriate. He said it started innocently enough, they were just excited to reconnect after being apart for so long. But somewhere along the line, the boundaries blurred. He told me about their childhood, filling in details I'd never known before. Their parents had divorced when Tom was 12 and Amy was 8. It had been a messy split, with their father leaving abruptly for another woman. Their mother fell into a deep depression, often unable to get out of bed for days at a time. Tom, being the older sibling, had to step up. He made sure Amy got to school, that there was food in the house, that bills were paid. They only had each other to lean on during those tough times. As they got older, Tom and Amy remained close, but Amy's move to Australia for her studies had put some distance between them. When she came back, Tom said it was like they were trying to make up for lost time. He admitted that he'd been struggling with some depression himself, feeling stuck in his job and unsure about the future. Amy's return had brought back the feeling of having someone who truly understood him. I asked him about the messages and photos I'd seen. Tom looked ashamed and said they'd been playing a stupid game, seeing who could send the most outrageous messages. He admitted it had gone too far and that he knew it was wrong. When I brought up the message about the summer when they were teenagers, Tom hesitated before explaining. That was the summer their mother had been hospitalized for a suicide attempt. Tom and Amy had spent most of the time at their aunt's farm, away from the chaos at home. It was a bittersweet memory, a terrible reason for being there, but a time when they felt free from their usual responsibilities. I was hurt and angry, but I could see Tom was genuinely remorseful. He offered to cut off contact with Amy if that's what it took to save our relationship. He also suggested we go to couples counseling to work through this. He admitted that he'd been taking our relationship for granted, and that he wanted to make things right. After our talk, I needed some time to process everything. I stayed with my friend Lisa for a few days to clear my head. During that time, I received a message from Amy. She apologized profusely, saying she never meant to come between Tom and me. She admitted that she and Tom had gotten carried away with their closeness, but swore there was nothing romantic or sexual between them. She talked about how hard it had been coming back to the States after being away for so long, and how Tom had been her anchor during the transition. Amy also shared some of her own struggles. She'd been in a long-term relationship in Australia that had ended badly just before she moved back. She said she'd been feeling lost and had clung to her relationship with Tom as something familiar and safe. She recognized that it wasn't fair to either of us and promised to work on building a life independent of her brother. I'm still trying to sort out my feelings. On one hand, I'm relieved that my worst fears weren't realized. I believe Tom and Amy when they say nothing physical happened between them. But on the other hand, I'm deeply hurt that Tom let things go this far and kept it from me. The emotional intimacy they shared feels like a betrayal, even if it wasn't physical. I've agreed to try couples counseling, but I'm not sure if our relationship can recover from this breach of trust. I keep wondering if I'll ever be able to fully trust Tom again, or if I'll always be worried about his relationship with Amy. For now, Tom has agreed to limit his contact with Amy to family gatherings only. He's also given me full access to his phone and social media accounts as a show of transparency. I appreciate these steps, but I know it will take more than that to rebuild what we've lost. I'm trying to focus on my own well-being too. I've started seeing a therapist on my own to work through my feelings about all of this. I'm also throwing myself into my work at the hospital, finding solace in caring for my young patients. I'll keep you all updated as things progress. Again, thank you for your support during this difficult time. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and I wanted to share what's been happening. Tom and I have been attending couples counseling weekly, and it's been both challenging and enlightening. During our sessions, we've delved deeper into Tom's relationship with Amy and how it affected our relationship. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, has been instrumental in helping us navigate these difficult conversations. She's encouraged us to be honest about our feelings, even when it's uncomfortable. Tom opened up about feeling guilty for not being there for Amy when she was abroad. He talked about how he'd always felt responsible for her, a leftover from their difficult childhood. He admitted that when she came back, he overcompensated by trying to be everything for her brother, best friend, and confidant. Dr. Martinez helped him see how this created an unhealthy dynamic, not just between him and Amy, but in our relationship as well. We've also been working on improving our communication. I've learned to express my concerns more clearly, instead of bottling them up until they explode. Tom's been working on being more open and honest about his feelings and actions. It's not easy, and there have been some heated moments in therapy, but I feel like we're making progress. One particularly intense session focused on trust. I shared how deeply Tom's actions had shaken my faith in our relationship. Tom listened without getting defensive, which was a big step for him. He acknowledged how his behavior had hurt me and expressed genuine remorse. We're now working on concrete steps to rebuild trust, like checking in with each other regularly and being transparent about our interactions with others. As for Amy, she's respected our request for space. She sent me a long email apologizing again and explaining her side of things. She talked about feeling lost and alone when she came back from abroad, and how she clung to her relationship with Tom as a source of stability. She recognized that it wasn't fair to either of us and promised to work on building a life independent of her brother. Amy mentioned that she's started seeing a therapist too, which I think is a positive step. She's also joined a local marine conservation group, which has given her a new focus and introduced her to new people. While I'm not ready to have a close relationship with Amy, I appreciate her efforts to make amends and create some healthy distance. Last week, we had a family dinner with Tom's parents. It was the first time we'd all been together since this whole situation began, and I was nervous about how it would go. It was awkward at first, with everyone seemingly walking on eggshells. But as the evening progressed, things started to feel more normal. I was relieved to see that Tom and Amy maintained appropriate boundaries throughout the dinner. There were no secret whispers or inside jokes, just normal sibling interaction. Tom's parents pulled me aside at one point to apologize. They said they had no idea how their divorce had affected their children and expressed regret for not being more present during those difficult years. They thanked me for standing by Tom and working through this with him. Their words meant a lot to me and helped me understand the family dynamics a bit better. While things are improving, I still have moments of doubt and insecurity. Sometimes I catch myself checking Tom's phone or wondering if he's being entirely truthful. Our therapist says this is normal and that rebuilding trust takes time. She's encouraged me to communicate these feelings to Tom instead of acting on them secretly. Tom has been patient and understanding through all of this. He's been making a real effort to prioritize our relationship and rebuild the trust between us. He's even started volunteering at a local community center, teaching art classes to kids. This has given him a new focus outside of work and family, which I think has been good for him. We're taking things day by day. There are good days and bad days, but overall, I feel cautiously optimistic about our future. The road ahead isn't easy, but I believe we're both committed to making this work. We're learning to be more honest with each other and ourselves, and I hope that will make our relationship stronger in the long run. Update 3. It's been 6 months since this whole ordeal began, and I wanted to give you all a final update. A lot has changed, and I've done a lot of thinking about my relationship with Tom and what I want for my future. After months of counseling and working on our relationship, Tom and I came to a difficult decision. We've decided to end our relationship. This wasn't an easy choice, and it wasn't made because of any new betrayal or issue. Rather, it was the result of a lot of soul-searching and honest conversations. Through our therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, we realized that the trust issues stemming from Tom's inappropriate relationship with Amy were just the tip of the iceberg. We uncovered deeper incompatibilities and differing life goals that we had been ignoring for a long time. Tom realized that he needs to work on himself and his family relationships before he can be a good partner to anyone. He's continuing with individual therapy and has started to set healthier boundaries with Amy and the rest of his family. He's also decided to take some time off work to travel and do some soul searching. I think this will be good for him, and I genuinely hope he finds the peace and clarity he's looking for. As for me, this experience has taught me a lot about what I need in a relationship and what my deal breakers are. I've learned to trust my instincts and to speak up when something doesn't feel right. I've also realized that I want a partner who's ready for the same level of commitment that I am, without any lingering family issues complicating things. The decision to end things wasn't made lightly. We spent several sessions with Dr. Martinez discussing whether our relationship could be salvaged. In the end, we both agreed that while we care for each other deeply, too much damage had been done. The trust that had been broken wasn't fully repaired, and I found myself constantly on edge, waiting for the next problem to arise. Breaking the news to our friends and family was hard. Many of them had been rooting for us to work things out. My parents, in particular, were disappointed. They had grown fond of Tom and had hoped we'd get married someday. Explaining the situation to them without going into all the details was challenging, but they've been supportive of my decision. Tom and I are in the process of disentangling our lives. We've lived together for so long that it's strange to think about not sharing a space anymore. We're dividing up our belongings and looking for new places to live. It's bittersweet, packing up the memories of our life together, but I know it's for the best. Amy reached out to me one last time to apologize again and to let me know that she's also in therapy, working on her dependency issues. While I appreciate her efforts, I've made it clear that I need a clean break from both her and Tom to move forward with my life. She understood and promised to respect my wishes. As for my own future, I'm focusing on my career and personal growth. I've signed up for a course in pediatric advanced life support, which I hope will open up new opportunities at the hospital. I'm also considering going back to school part-time to get my master's degree in nursing. I've started reconnecting with old friends that I had somewhat neglected during my relationship with Tom. Last weekend, I went on a hiking trip with a group of girlfriends, and it felt incredibly freeing to just be myself without worrying about anyone else's needs or feelings. Dating isn't on my radar right now. I think I need some time to process everything that's happened and to get comfortable with being on my own again. When I do start dating, I'll be looking for someone who's emotionally available and has healthy family relationships. It's been a tough journey, but I'm proud of how I've handled this situation. I stood up for myself, sought help when I needed it, and ultimately made the decision that's best for my well-being. While there's still some sadness and a sense of loss, I'm also feeling hopeful about the future. To everyone who supported me through this, thank you. Your advice and kind words helped me more than you know. While this isn't the happy ending some of you might have hoped for, I feel it's the right ending for me. I'm looking forward to the future and the opportunity to find a healthier, more fulfilling relationship when the time is right. For now, I'm focusing on building a life that makes me happy, with or without a partner. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. Thank you all again for being there through this journey. Your support has meant the world to me.